Movie maker.
Okay. Hold on a second. So this is part 2 of my breakdown story. I am now in my pajamas, had my bath, brushed my teeth, feel like bedtime Barbie. And I'm tired. So, I am gonna make this quicker, I think. But I do want to get up to the present and things like that. So, excuse me. So where we left off was that I was in Jonathan's office, and sitting on the floor and feeling really spaced out. So I was sitting on the floor and I felt like I was just floating out of my body, and like I was kind of perched on the ceiling across the room, listening to Jonathan talk to different people in his office. And I'm like, that's interesting. Isn't this my session? Like, geez, if you really wanted to talk to other people, like, reschedule me, And I just heard these different voices talking to him and him talking to them, and I really didn't know what was going on, except I was, like, way high up in the air, and that was interesting. And then all of a sudden I heard him say, it's time to stop, and I, like, crash landed into my body, and it was such a weird experience. It's like I was flying in the air, and then all of a sudden I was like, boom, I was like in my body and like aware of everything, and like aware that I was on the floor, and that like my whole head was like spinning with like all these voices talking in my head, and it was so weird. And it was just completely out of control and out of reality, and so then I was hearing this, and I was hearing, all of these voices talking, and then I really had trouble talking. I'd be like, Jonathan, I know that I need to leave, and I'd say it like that fast, and then I'd be like, I need to get up. I'd say it like that slow, or I'd be like, what do I do? And I don't know, and like it just felt like I couldn't get words out. Like my mouth and jaw and teeth and tongue, how you articulate the words wasn't working. So I was all kind of like blah, 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 blah. Or I was talking way too fast, or the tone was wrong. It's like the whole concept of how we form words and speak in sentences was completely scrambled for me at that moment. And it was very scary to me. And so eventually he said, do you ever think about blinking? It's a really weird metaphor to use for a blind person, but I can blink my eyes. And I'm like, yeah, I know how to blink, and open and close my eyes. I can blink. But he said, but if you think about blinking, did I move my eyes? How do I blink? How do I do this? It becomes really disturbing. But if you just realize when you need to talk, you'll talk. It'll just happen. And I said, okay, that makes sense. And, I could talk then. And I had some water, and he gave me a hug. And I asked him if he was upset by what happened, because I obviously came out of this state not knowing what was happening. Honestly, he had to tell me, like, you're in my office, everything else. And we really couldn't address that I was hearing all these voices, but he was like, these voices are part of you. And I was like, no way. Like, you made that one comment. And then he was like, well, I'm like, are you upset? He's like, oh, no, you let a lot out today. And I was like, okay. And it seemed like he felt really satisfied with that. So we set up another meeting, and I went outside with Jess, and I came upstairs, and things seemed okay for a couple days. Then I was in Medline. It felt really weak and weird. It felt like I was, when I don't eat, like randomly, I'll do this turning white thing where I just don't, it could be like even after I ate, which is weird, where I just feel like completely like nauseous and dizzy and just weak and cold sweat and everything. And so it felt like that when I was standing, so I was like, have me sit down. So I sat in the chair. And then I felt the panic attack feeling, which I had been warding off for the past days, telling myself there was no reason to have panic attacks. I had been, how I've gotten myself to never have panic attacks again is to say, okay, I can handle dealing with depression. I can handle dealing with generalized anxiety. I can handle dealing with the effects of the trauma that I know about, and I know my own mind. But I will not deal with these panic attacks and feeling like I'm going to die and, overwhelmed to the point you can't breathe. Like, that is unacceptable to me. So I will never have another panic attack again. And lo and behold, after I made that decision, I think it was like after I had this hospitalization that was really crazy, I came home, and after that I have never had a panic attack since. Ever. I felt like I might have one. And then I just tell myself, no. There is no reason to have a panic attack. There's nothing going on. No one's after me. No one's going to kill me. There's no reason to get this anxious. And boom, I never had one again. And no, this isn't the secret to curing panic attacks. It's just what I do to get by, which is a big theme of my breakdown, is this is what I'm doing to get by, and that I feel works. And in a world where I was completely out of control for 9 months, and I wasn't getting any support, really, finding one thing that works, even if it doesn't seem healthy to one person, is amazing to another person, because it gets you through the day. So I had the panic attack feelings, but instead of feeling like there wasn't enough air in the room, it felt like the air in the room was of really bad quality, thick and smoky, or too humid, or too cold, or dusty. Poor air quality. It was a poor air quality day in the building all of a sudden, and nobody else noticed. So I couldn't stay myself anymore, and so I must have snapped out of reality. And what happened then was that basically for the next 2 weeks, I was not in my body, I was not in my mind, I was somewhere else. And Jess had the pleasure of getting to know a 5-year-old girl who knew that Jess was my friend, and knew that we were roommates, and knew that, that another girl, as she put it, lived there. But she didn't know why she was there, or she said something about that John, she calls him Nice Man Jay, said it was okay for her to be there, and all this stuff, and so she was there for 2 weeks, and Jess had to deal with her for 2 weeks. And then I came in and out, and I was just a mess, because I'm like, what is going on? And I tried to be like, because stuff would happen, and I totally reorganized my room one day that I totally would never have done. I asked for a hairbrush. I never brush my hair, ever. I took a bath in the middle of the day. I don't do these things. And I would just say things that made complete no sense. Like, I would say to Jess, like, I can't stand the sound of the name Sam, or just like, I don't know, just talk in a totally different way. Like, I guess say things like, oh, well, this is what the word yes means. This is what the word no means. This is what maybe means. Like, say every word and, like, what it means to a 5-year-old. And, like, she would just go on and on about that kind of stuff. And so, that was a horrible feeling. And then towards the end of the 2 weeks, so Christmas came by and went, and I did pull myself together, I think, for Christmas, and I would have these moments where I did feel okay, and I would just be telling myself, this is ridiculous, this is crazy, I don't know what's going on. And, it was helping somewhat. The other thing that started then and persisted through the hospitalization, certainly afterwards, and then certainly up until we moved to Clayton, was what I call brain-based symptoms. So the memory loss and the, feeling, acting, and saying that I'm a 5-year-old, and there's others, is on one side of the issues. The other issues is what I call brain-based, how you sense the information coming from the world through your senses, and the information inside your body, and how you express back to the world what's going on. So all of that got really screwy. So sensing, I touch could feel, there was the continuum of one side was too high, where everything was, buzzing and at such a high intensity and quality that I can't even really explain it. It's like sounds sounded so loud, it felt like I had headphones on all day. Only a few people could be talking, or like one person talking with environmental noise, and you hear other people in the background or TV or whatever, and it would just be too much for me to listen to. Certain sounds like doors slamming, people walking, whistling, clapping, music, just hearing music, hurt my ears. The sounds of different voices hurt my ears. Everything was just so sharp and in focus when it came to sound and hearing. On the others, and the same thing with touch. Someone could touch me lightly, and I would feel like they were touching under my skin. I was aware of the fabrics of my clothes brushing my skin. I was aware of the hair on my neck and exactly where everything felt, and just contact with the ground or whatever would feel so clear. And so there was that aspect. And then on the other end, and like even I had a cup of oatmeal, and it was warm, but it wasn't hot. I touched it, and my thumb actually got a pink mark on it. It wasn't that hot, but my skin obviously registered it as extremely hot because I got a burn, not a burn mark, but a mark on it. That, wow, this is so hot, So yeah, the textures of food in my mouth tasted really different. So things like that. Then the other end of things, it was too low. It was too blurred. There was no definition to anything. It was like everything was blurred. Everything was far away and muted, and the volume on everything was turned down. And I would have trouble hearing people speaking because there would be so many people talking, and it was hard for me to pick out who was talking to me and then what they were saying. All the words were just like this jumble of, sounds all colliding into each other. So I couldn't, hear really what someone was saying. I couldn't process, like, okay, is this a sound of a word or is this a word? Like I didn't use yeah. I spoke in a really strange way too. Not just the whole physical speaking that I am going to keep talking about, but the words I would use. I would say yes a lot instead of yeah. I would say I understand a lot instead of okay. And just more simple language, I guess. And probably because that's all my brain could handle. It was hard to just be in my body and mind and also interact with the rest of the world. So I would say yes instead of yeah, and things like that. And I think why I said yes instead of yeah was there were times I heard yeah, and I'm like, is that part of a word? Like, I can't think of a word, but like, it just, it was a struggle to be like, is this a word? Or is this like a sound of a word? And it's hard to explain. I'm trying to think of a sound that someone might use to say. I don't know, just words got scrambled up, and so I couldn't tell, like I said, what was the sound and what was a word. And then, if I had that problem, and then once I figured out it was a word or words, I had to sort of pick them together, listening, and put them together of like, what does the sentence mean? And then how do I apply it to me? So like, Jess and I would get in huge arguments and triggers with each other because we had to redefine communication because I couldn't just talk and have a normal conversation. I had to, because I was dealing with either not being able to physically pronounce words, So it'd be like, nah, nah. I wish I had recordings of me doing it, but it would just be like I couldn't get certain words out of my mouth. Or I wasn't talking at the right speed. I mean, I know I'm a fast talker, but I mean, it wasn't the right speed for a sentence. It was unnaturally quick or unnaturally slow. It's like looking at like a screen reader or a recorder that has those speeds on it, and you speed it up and slow it down, and it makes it sound so different. I mean, that's what my brain was like. It was just like I couldn't form the words in the right way, in the right pitch, with the right volume, with the right everything that you think of with speaking. So I was having problems just getting phrases out and getting answers out on that way. And then the listening way, like I said, I would pick up, if I was on the high end, I would pick up like emotions behind words where I knew that the person wasn't saying what they were really feeling, because the emotion was like 100 degrees high, and the actual words were like less than 50% like accurate. So if Jess was saying like, oh, it's good to know that this is what you're going through, and she said it in that tone of voice, I was like, okay, it's good to know that this is what you're going through. She doesn't mean that, because I'm getting this, really frustrated, totally confused vibe from her that totally overpowered that sentence, to the point that sentence didn't even make any sense anymore, because the emotion behind it was so different from the actual sentence. So when I was in that high mode, that's how I operated, and that's how I listened, and what I listened for. And that's how I responded. If I felt something strongly, then I would respond very strongly emotionally. And I could, I could, have a simple sentence or say something and put so much behind it that I think for her too, I mean, it's unnatural to have like the pure raw emotion be in one's, communication. So often we hide things, or you use a word and then people have so many ideas about what that word means, like in that situation, that, you might have said it in a way that makes sense to you, but they might not, make a different sense to the other person because of where they are emotionally or how they associate that word with, a feeling that isn't even your feeling. Like, I think I said once, she was really, really, really upset. And so I said, can you please not, and I said it in a really neutral, kind voice. I said, can you please not, I know you're upset. I really think you should go to staff. Can you please not slam the door on the way out? And she got even upset, more upset, because she's like, to her, it was like, she heard it as like, don't slam the door on the way out, like, I'm so mad at you, you better, a totally different emotion to what I was trying to convey. And I didn't know that, and I can't put in her mind, like, this is how I feel on this particular word. Like, you have to say it first. And so the listening and communication would get so tangled up in all these little details that for me stood out so strongly that I couldn't filter out anything. I couldn't just be concentrating on speaking and listening in the way you would with, I'd say, like a normal functioning, healthy functioning brain. So that was a huge thing. And like I said, on the other end of it, with the listening, when things were really far away, I would be trying to just talk to try to just get out a sentence because I was struggling so bad with that. And she would randomly say something like, hey, do you want to go to Main Foods? When do you want me to when do you want me to take you to Main Foods? First of all, that sentence had a lot of work. No, that sentence was very fast. When do you want to take me to Main, and how people would talk. When do you want to go to Main Foods? And I was like, to me it was like, it just all these sounds that made no sense. And so I'm like, wait a minute, like I need to slow this down to finally hear, when do you want to take me to Main Foods? When do you want me to take you to Main Foods? Okay. let's start. What is Maine Foods? Oh yeah, Maine Foods, store down the street from Albany. Really cheap snacks. Okay, Maine Foods is a store. When is a time, so it means that at some time going to the store. When do you want me? What? Oh, you mean it's saying when do I want her to take me to that store? Wait a minute, I don't want her to do anything except give me some peace and quiet so I can put together this sentence. I don't want her to do anything. I'm not thinking about the store. So you just gave me all this information that I had to take apart, put back together, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the moment we're in, because I was living moment to moment because my brain was living moment to moment. So it was so frustrating. So those were the spectrums and intensities that I was living on from definitely the end of December through March 5th, 14th, or 13th when we moved into Clayton. That was always there all the time. All the time. I was always alert to everything, every noise, every movement of people walking by the door, where I was in relationship to people standing around me. I'd hear things on TV and it would just feel like, I don't know, things would trigger me on TV, like just hearing about say a shooting. And I'd be like, there's a gun? Gun? Where? Oh my God, someone just got shot. Oh my God. What do I do? Why isn't anyone doing anything? What's going on? And it's like I was thrown into the trauma of just what was being talked about on TV. So I couldn't read anything or hear anything because so much of it would talk about a really horrible situation, and I would almost take on that situation and be like I was in it, That's the only way I can explain it. The other thing had to do with body stuff. My muscles would tense up and relax or contract and release whatever on their own, and they still do this, and I don't know why, and it felt really weird. And sometimes I wasn't really aware of where my body was. Sometimes I'd be sitting and I wouldn't realize that I hadn't moved for hours, and my legs would be in weird positions, and a lot of that was because I would be doing something and then bang, I would be out of awareness and completely literally out of my mind, out of myself, and just gone. And when I was gone, whether it was an hour, 20 minutes, the most it was 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks that I was barely around. And then, basically up until I moved here, it was mostly whole days. And then I came here and it was some whole days, stretches of hours, certain events that would happen during my day, like a routine I would be gone for, and different things like that. Now, because of the behavior program we're doing, it's less than a few minutes that I'm actually being pushed out of my awareness. But so back then I would just be gone for however long, and I'd be sitting there doing stuff, and I wouldn't know anything about my body, whether I was thirsty, hungry, tired, anything, because I would just be sitting there, and then I'd come back and I'd feel all these feelings, physical sensations that I was totally, removed from. And then when I was walking, sometimes it would feel like my feet were going in all these different directions. I felt like a spider or octopus or something with a million legs, and I was just I felt like I was tripping over my own feet, and sometimes I'd just be sitting there and I'd try to lean back and my whole head would flop over, my neck had no control over, I couldn't keep my head centered. And those were the body things, and that bothered me too. And like I said, there were times I would just freeze and would find it very hard to do, much of anything except sit and wait for my body to relax again, depending on what muscles froze up. And So then, a little bit more, so those symptoms, by some miracle, went away on the day we moved in, which is very interesting. But to get back to what is the main issue, which is the main issue that I'm dealing with right now, that has stuck and is sticking and driving me nuts. It has changed my life forever. When even I know I will move on from this, I know I will put it behind me as fast as I can, still, it has left its mark on me forever. So we talked about the me being gone and leaving. When I am gone, I will go into these states where I will 100% believe that my name is Honey and I am 5 years old. And I like kids' TV shows, and I talk in my own voice, and I use my own words like bestest and, bestest, and call Jess Beanie, and, just a whole different language and a whole different way of speaking and interacting, but be totally convinced that I am this person, and sort of living out my life as this 5-year-old person in my body and in the circumstances that we're physically living in. I'm going to try to count from what I know. Honey Amber, Co, Jenny, Carolyn and Heather, 6, 7, well, about 6, like, give or take. The main states I get into where I talk as if I'm another person are Honey and Co, who I guess was supposed to be my inner therapist or something. They were the first ones to come. Honey, I think, came in Jonathan's office, and she was the one that spoke to him, along with probably some of these others. So Honey and Co was the first ones. The others came in relationship to these two, and sort of creating their own, like, family, I guess, in my mind. So while I'm gone, these people will just continue living my life. I could come up from dinner and totally be fine, and then be sitting on my bed hanging out, and then for no reason in particular, one of them comes out, usually the kid, talks to Jess, uses the computer with Jess's permission, or with, I guess, another of them can, like, watch from inside my head, and do the computer, take a bath. She would love taking a bath. She would take the bath, put on my pajamas. Another one would come, an adult would come, because Honey was the only child state I went into. So these adults could easily, act as me. And I guess some of them are there just to pretend to be Sam, which is really creepy. So, another adult would walk me downstairs. I would get my medication. No one would know anything. I would come back upstairs, and Jess would go to say goodnight, and I would somehow snap out of it, not having any memory of the past 4 hours. That's what it's like. I was sitting on my bed talking, and then bing, a second later, I was in bed in my pajamas with my bath and teeth done and saying goodnight to Jess. That's how it happened. I could be going to Walmart. I could remember walking in the store, getting in the chair cart, and then walking out of the store. Anything in between was done by these other, when I was in these other states, and the person that is me, somehow I couldn't access. So that's the problem in a nutshell. That I go into these states, that I then believe in my mind 100% that I am these other people, and that the person that I know I am is just blocked from being able to be accessed and entered into the reality of myself. And I don't know why this is going on at all. When you look this up, one of the first things that comes up is dissociative identity disorder, which means that a person has had such severe trauma at a very early age, like before the age of 7, usually physical and sexual abuse, that their mind cannot handle it, and so they split into different personality states to handle the abuse and anything else, and live this person's life for them, and because so they can function, so a part can function, and so they don't have a complete breakdown and could physically die if they're in extreme situations that they have to be alert and functioning to survive. Then the dissociation is a survival thing, and that keeps going because the person then faces other situations, say like they're in college or whatever, and they're doing something and they can't cope with, say, like school stress or a friend or having a first boyfriend, so another personality state is created from their mind, knowing that's how they do things in their head, and then that takes on that aspect of things. It's very complex and kind of confusing, but that is what that is, as far as I am concerned, that I know of it is. It's very controversial, and it's pretty rare. And I know other multiples wouldn't agree with me, but that's how I see it. And I looked up my symptoms, and it seemed like that was it. And of course we had no help with this at all. We had no help. When Jonathan found out that the symptoms were still going on, he basically turned his back on me and said, I have never heard of Amber, Carolyn, Honey, anybody besides Sam. I don't know what to do with that. I don't even have the time to know how to help you. So goodbye. And he didn't even say goodbye to me. And then I came here, and so I just came in with the assumption, I said I identify as having alters because that's just what it looks like. And no one, of course, from Albany had put anything in my chart to, give any help. And the psychiatrist I had, they threw me in the hospital because they were so afraid I was having these new symptoms, even though I wasn't a threat to anybody. And nobody put anything on that chart either. So I'm having these huge symptoms, ruining my life, and nobody is charting it. No one is recording it as a way to get me any kind of treatment or direction. So I came in, and Clayton people said, well, we'll never invalidate your alters, but we can't help you with it. It's too complicated. And I resented that at first, and I resent the fact that they're less trauma-informed than they say they are. But that's a whole other video. So on that subject, it was that I was left alone to try to look up some kind of therapy. And what I found out was that the Medicaid was not only, inadequate, but they had huge waiting lists. All the other therapists I wrote, and it was dozens of people, would hear my symptoms and just say, this really sounds like DID. I'm not comfortable working with it. And I'm like, well, I don't care what it sounds like. I don't have a diagnosis. I don't have that label. I don't have that label, so you need to work with me as a person that I am. And I'm telling you, we can do a lot of work that doesn't involve this dissociation, because, there's a lot of times I'm not dissociating. And so, yeah. But they all said no. And the ones that could have helped were all booked out. So I was just at a loss. And, there was supposed to be a therapist that worked here, but they stopped working here and took forever for interns to come. But the biggest change for me happened last month, I think it was. We had a really good room on the 4th floor, on the women's floor. But the elevator in this building is so old that it is breaking down a lot. And so we would have to go up and down 4 flights of stairs. And Jess could not handle that with her body. I could not handle that. And so we were moved to the 2nd floor. When you move to a different room or a different floor, you get a different caseworker. So my second caseworker, Lakeisha, said, why are we saying alters and saying dissociation when we don't know that that's what you have? We need to make sure. And I had seen the psychiatrist first with the director of nursing, and he had kind of been like, Well, yeah, it looks like it, but I've only seen like one real case of it, and I don't really know what to tell you. It seems like they're more like just personality aspects, and you just need to take on what they do, and everything will be fine. And he really didn't say much of anything at all, of any substance. But by this time, and I'd gotten Lakeisha, and I also connected with Rob, who is her supervisor, who was the other caseworker supervisor, but for some reason I never really got that connection with him until the new change, which I don't know why. So this time Rob came with me to the appointment, and this was a few weeks ago. And the doctor said, no, you don't have dissociative identity disorder. You're not dissociating enough because you are aware of what's going on, because you hear the voices that he believed the voices of whatever these things are. I told him that I've heard the voices coming from outside my head. And now I know it is inside my head. But I feel like the thing that's coming in is nothing to do with my personality or anything to do with, goodness. It is bad energetic forces or something coming in and taking control of my mind. And putting words in my head I'd never say, and pushing me into these states where they are in charge, and whether I am doing like I don't know if it's like they come in and they tell me you are this person, and so then I act like this person. I don't know, but I feel like it's something from the outside coming in, and I feel like I need a medication to help with this. That just like my mood and stuff is pretty stable with all my antidepressants and mood stabilizers and anxiety medication. I need something to help with this brain-based stuff, like the communication and sensing stuff has left, but I'm afraid it will come back. And this whole other thing that no matter how I try to get out of this with my thinking and that resource, rationalization, there's an aspect that I can't work with that I feel is chemical. And I feel like until that gets addressed, I'm always going to be fighting this in some way or another. I might always be fighting this even with the medication, but I need that chemical help. And the only thing that I could think of, the big categories of what these symptoms could be is dissociative disorder on that spectrum, psychotic disorder on that spectrum, or a personality disorder on that spectrum. Or maybe a mood disorder like bipolar. I've heard a few different doctors and random people say it sounds like I have bipolar 2, but that hasn't been diagnosed. The only diagnosis I have, and I know this from seeing my chart today, the stuff that you send with you, is depressive disorder. And I'm not sure if that covers all of my experiences, but diagnosis is so strange and can be so stupid that really it's only useful to get treatment. And I guess people really don't know what's going on, because he said it's not that, and I was really happy. And he said he didn't believe it was schizophrenia. He believed that I could hear these things, and that so they were inside me, and that I knew something about them, so that meant I knew. And I tried to explain this to him, the only stuff I know about them is stuff that I've read or heard from Jess or other people, and read off the internet and left recordings. They've left stuff for me to learn about them in the hopes, I guess, that I would communicate with them and get to know them, which you do not get to know an unhealthy energetic presence, by the way. That's the worst thing you can do. But I'm not going to do that. And so, but I did know some things about them. I knew their ages and their jobs. And that type of thing. So when I was telling him that, he's like, well, then you do know something, but then your mind just like snaps away from it. And he was saying, yeah, these are aspects of who you are that are unexpressed, and you need to look at them and whatever. And I was just at the tears and screaming, because I was like, no, I am not going to face what you consider aspects of me. The person that I was before December 17th, whoever that person is. I don't want to go into what makes up a person, whatever. He asked me all these stupid questions on that. Just who Sam is from before that is still who Sam is now. The problem is, whenever it feels like this other stuff, nameless bad stuff, drops on top of me, shapes itself into a mask of whoever they are and says, I am this person, blah, 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 blah. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm making my own friends, I'm making my own YouTube channel, I'm going shopping, I want this type of food, I'm going to bed at this time. And I'm just using this body and mind to act out who I am. So I'm just using it like a prop, and you are the puppet and I'm just acting through Sam's body. That's really what it feels like. And then whenever they're done, they, whip back the mask and I'm here, which I always was, but no one knew it because I was underneath all the crud. And that's definitely how it feels. It's like I can step out of this thing. I know what it is. I mean, I know that these people really do believe they're people. They have their own world that operates totally separate from me and my head. I guess it's in my head, but it's totally separate from anything that I could ever imagine as reality. And definitely separate from anything that I could ever imagine even considering accepting. Because why would you accept something that throws itself over you, attacks you basically into behaving a certain way and doing what they want you to do, for them, for their sake. And then, coming in and out like that with no respect for you, and that you are one person and they are, I don't know, some kind of ghosts or something that have not found a new, body to land in, or maybe they're just like, I don't even know, but whatever they are, they're in the wrong place and they're taking advantage of a person, that they can somehow access me and, work through me because, they feel like it. And so that really is the issue to me. And so I refuse to accept that this is something inside me. I understand about subpersonalities. We act different in different times and different days and everything else, and we have different characteristics. And this whole therapy that I'm going to be doing starting tomorrow, hopefully, is that internal family systems that I will put some information on another video once I hear more from her about it. I've looked it up. But it's basically a really creative, innovative way to look at your personality, look at your inner struggles, inner conflicts, and look at, what are the different parts of you that do this, and why are they doing it, and how can you communicate with them from a place of calm and, authority, which is good. And I guess maybe I think I've had that effect on this stuff, because what I've been doing more and more since he said it's not DID, and it's not schizophrenia, and it's probably not a personality disorder, because you have to have those like really long lasting and a lot of other things, not just, I'm acting like these people for attention, even if it was I'm acting like these people for attention, for drama. That's only one aspect of, creating drama like that, or having really intense, ideas about how to have relationships, is only one thing about it. So we don't know what it is. And since then, Lakeisha and Rob said, okay, we're relieved it's not this. But Sam still goes into these states that she hates it and it's frustrating to her, and so how can we help with our limited resources? So they came up with a plan that if I started to say, I'm Honey, I'm Amber, I'm whoever, they would talk us to me and they'd say, Sam, Sam, we're talking to Sam now, and we're only working with Sam. And they would address me as me and not the other person, and they would just basically ignore the state I was in with regard to not feeding into that behavior. Because the more you feed into that behavior, the more the person's likely to do it. And so what's happened is, it has happened that whatever this is, has stopped taking me over, particularly around staff, and even around Jess, though that's harder, because it knows that it's not going to get attention or any kind of positive or negative response. So that's what is really helping. Another thing that has been helping is I make recordings of myself talking to them and saying very clearly and firmly and in authority, this is my body, this is my mind, I am in charge, and you are not welcome here. You are not welcome in my world, you're not welcome with my friends, you're not welcome on the computer, you're not welcome doing anything in my life, taking over my body and doing this, and you're not welcome doing anything in my head. And for the longest time, it just wasn't sinking in. And I did a lot of imagery of myself, pretending to round up the various people, put them in cages, throw them off internal cliffs, fly them away in airplanes, kill them in any way I could, lock them up, anything that I could do to imagine myself being protected from these things and these things being killed off and destroyed and no longer around to hurt anybody. So I would do that as well. And it would work for a few days, maybe, but it seemed like always the child part, honey, would come back. And it really frustrated me until I realized at the root of whatever this is, this out of reality world that has somehow attached itself to me, is the co and honey. They were the first that appeared. The other ones, like I said, sprang from them. So the root is them, and if we get to them and get them out, everything else is going to fall away. I really believe that. So I have been working very hard to do the same internal boundaries that have been happening externally. I hear their voice and it's like, no, you're not real. Stop. And I can even say that out loud. I came to an insight today where, I was sort of hearing a voice in my head, like talking, or like I had a thought that really didn't feel like my thought. It felt like it was someone else's, and it just really scared me. And I said, I always tell people, please tell them they're not real. That's what they need to hear. But I need to hear that they're not real. I need to remind myself, this is me, this is Sam. I can beat this. This has nothing to do with me. These are bad things that I need to overcome and get rid of. And get myself back to myself 100% of the time like I used to. And I'm really doing, I'd say, at least around 50% of the time, which is great, because I would be in these cycles of fighting using the imagery and just the imagery, and usually mental, not recorded, to do things, and then they would come out anyways. And a lot of it was, triggered by seeing staff, triggered by, no one knew not to interact with them. And like I said, the stance here was no one invalidate the altars. Well, now that we know there aren't altars, it's a totally different state. So it was a lot of coming out of that, and I think that it was a shock to whatever they are to realize that, this is not what's going to happen. But I think the turning point came when I started recording my thoughts to them and my rules and guidelines and authority to them. That I am over you. You are down here, I am up there. And I am telling you this is how it's going to be. And the more that I've done that, the more that it's helped. And so that's kept me around, I'd say maybe less than 50%, maybe more. I don't know, maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit. But finding something that's worked in the past few weeks when 8 months or 7.5 months of not working has been amazing. And I just want to keep on that path because I'm seeing results with it, as hard as it can be. Like sometimes I will come out of a state crying and Jess will say that the little girl was upset. And then I'm like, well, of course the little girl is upset. She's not getting her way anymore. And so because I am saying this is the way, so of course she's upset. I'm not going to change my stance on this. She can be upset. They can be upset all they want. Hopefully that'll make them leave. I want to make the inside world as neutral and even uncomfortable as possible, so they know that they are not, whatever they want to do and need to do, they can do it together someplace else. But it's not happening in my space, in my energetic whatever field, or mind or body or anything. So that's how I've been tackling this. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot to not just stop caring, because, like I said, I was in the fighting mode all the time. And then I would just be so not depressed, but so drained I couldn't do anything anymore. And, that's when I would just say, I don't care what they do. They're beating me at every turn anyways. They're going to do what they want to do, and that's it. And I would just totally pull back and let them do whatever, and they could do whatever for like days or weeks. But then I would see things like what they said to my friends, and actually them making friends with my friends. I've lost my friends because of them. They had their own email address or whatever. It would snap me out of it and be like, I need to fight for my life. So that was the cycle that I was in. But now that I've been, with the help of staff, setting these boundaries and putting them in this category of, you're not Sam, you're not real. Whatever you are, you need to stop and leave Sam alone. This is her life and her body and her mind. And this is a symptom of what she's going through. And you are not real. And I need to say that to myself to keep going as well. So the recordings and the boundaries, external, have brought me out of this a really good amount. It just so happened last week that I got an email from an intern at the Awakening Center who said, you camp on the waiting list. Because of course I put my name on a million waiting lists. I won't be surprised if I got emails from other places. And she said, you camp on the waiting list. We can set up an intake. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to do this intern. Because I did just recently see an intern for a few sessions here that just really wasn't confident in what she was doing. I don't even think she knew whether or not she wanted to do counseling anymore. Or counseling at all. It was just crazy. The whole thing is too much. It's too confusing and complicated for so many people. And all these therapists saying no, means that it's so complicated and mysterious and difficult. Because it doesn't fit any of the boxes for mental disorders. And the purpose of those boxes is to get, hopefully, treatment. So I'm just like out there in the middle of nowhere. No one can connect me in with a specific problem or issue in order to say, let's address that issue. It's kind of like, well, let's address this pile of unrelated weird stuff that's hanging off of Sam's head, and hopefully we can get it off some way or another. Or they'll say, well, it needs to actually be in Sam's head and part of her. And I'm like, well, no, this is just some random pieces of junk that got blown into my mind, So I wrote her and I said, I don't know if you can do this because it's a huge challenge. Other therapists will not do it. But here's the deal. And I told her what was going on. I also have evidence. The last thing that these people, monsters, things did was create their own YouTube and blog. And I was so mad at first that, oh my goodness, here is them going nuts and, putting this craziness of what looks like Sam, talks like Sam, usually, but isn't Sam, on the internet, and I have an online presence, and I didn't want people to know, because it seemed like many people that knew just couldn't get over their own opinions on it enough to really be supportive. So I didn't want any more of that happening. So I decided, so I listened, and whoever did it was at least smart enough to not use my real name, and told viewers that if they saw this and it reminded them of somebody else who has a YouTube channel, please do not link the two in telling other people, which was probably the most kind thing they did, because at least they didn't embarrass me in front of the whole world. But what I realized was that this is a perfect thing, because I don't have to try to explain to them what it feels like. Well, I have to explain to them what it feels like to be taken over, but because I'm gone during this time, I have no memory of what they did, how they sounded, anything unless Jess or someone else tells me, or I hear it on a recording, or I see writing. So this gives people an inside look into what happens in my head that I couldn't give them any other way. So I sent them the videos, and the Megan, the interns, have a really good supervisor named Amy. And the center, briefly, is a very holistic center. It's a lot for eating disorders, but it's for anything, any depression, anxiety, trauma, any, the therapies they use can be applied to a lot of things. And they use, eating, they have nutritionists, they have yoga therapy, they have, expressive art therapy, they have the internal family systems, they have DBT. So they have a lot going on that is holistic and sort of understanding a whole person's experience. And I suppose all the parts of a person's personality, which I suppose if you really believe that these things are parts of my personality, then that's how you could address them. However, when I was rating these therapists from their profiles, it made it seem like they might also believe that, these could be parts of my personality, but they would respond differently. So I was not optimistic that an intern could respond on that, and so I sent it. But I also said, because the staff has helped me stop going into these states, we still don't know why I go in them, and how exactly I can't get myself out myself, but they have helped me to get out of those states. And I've told whatever this is, you cannot be in front of staff, which is including the therapist. So I am very confident I can go in there and not have a problem with being, pushed out of myself and reality, because it just won't happen. So that made me feel better. But I still wasn't, and I've tried to tell these other therapists, there's so much we can do that's separate from this. I have experiences of being fine and not having this happen, which makes it so horrible when it does happen. But so, she wrote back and she said, I saw the videos, I saw I heard what you had to say, and the supervisor saw them, and we look forward to doing the intake and working with your parts. And I guess that's just her way of saying, let's just take it one step at a time, do the intake and see where it goes from there. And I'm willing to do that. And the intake, by the way, is an hour and a half. And I am so happy about this, because it will be the most concentrated evaluation of me since this happened, since December 17th, that I have gotten. I have been dying for evaluations, preferably from different professionals. Like when I was dealing with the sensory stuff, it's like, why can't I see an OT? Why can't I see a speech person if my speech is so bad? Why isn't anyone taking this seriously? But they weren't at Albany Care. And then here they just were like, well, I can't really help you. It took that caseworker to say, we need a straight answer on this. So diagnosis aside, when I'm not looking for a diagnosis, I'm looking for a place where I can just talk and be myself, be the person that I know I am, focus on strengthening my internal resources so this doesn't happen again, and moving on to, what I want in my future, and, just having that place to have a therapist to really process things. And so that will be such a relief, and just to hear her thoughts on the whole thing. I will be honest that I have I cannot accept people saying that people who have seen and interacted with this stuff, and then also seen and interacted with me, who say this stuff is part of you. I find that disturbing, very disturbing, terrifying, and almost insulting, because it's like, you're telling me that these monsters, these things that take over with no regard to someone else's mind and life, are part of me? Like, no, that is not true. That can't be true. They're unhealthy things. I'm not going to have unhealthy things anywhere near my head if I can help it at all. Which means I'm going to do anything I can to fight these